6:39, Nashville's Morning News on Super Talk 99.7. You know, I asked, and I certainly did receive, your favorite dumb Democrat. It really is a clown show. And when you actually sit down and you think about these folks, you've got Hank Johnson, who thought that an island could, tilt upside down, turn over, if you will. You've got Maxine Waters. You've got Adam Schiff. Jamal Bowman, which, according to Chris Hand, of course, squad adjacent is what I was trying to say. You've got AOC. You've got Ilhan Omar. I mean, you look at these folks and you listen to these folks, and truly, Clown Show is Nancy Pelosi. Clown Show is really the proper way to describe these folks. So, Swalwell, another one. Jerry Nadler, another. How did I miss all of these? Anthony Weiner, that goes back a little bit. But, you could just go on and on with these folks. I'm trying to, they are coming in. AOC, Mad Maxine. Most people are saying Hank Johnson. Now, I want to bring in Matthew Hurtt to the conversation. Matthew, you are right there, like in the circus tent, if you will, observing all of these clowns. And do you have a favorite dumb Democrat? Because when you look at these folks, and they've said silly things, they've done silly things, quite frankly, some of them look incredibly silly. Do you have a favorite?
AOC lives just a few blocks south of the House side of the Capitol, right above a Whole Foods, if she's still in that apartment. And when she was doing her wine and IKEA furniture assembly Instagram lives a couple of years ago, that was some of the silliest content that I've seen. Basically a bunch of these young Democrats who were molded in upper division political science courses with left-wing professors like the ones I had at MTSU. They have the silliest ideas that do not work in practice, that actually make Americans less well-off, more impoverished, and less free. And those are the ones, those clowns, especially the ones that are around my age now, who are in Congress, who are the most clownish, but also the most dangerous, because their ideas are what we rejected, what the 20th century rejected, socialism and communism, which led to the deaths of tens of millions of people, and they want to import that right here to the U.S. Through the halls of Congress. And, you had Tim Burchett on in the last segment, and that guy is the conscience, the common sense voice in the House. He's a great guy, and just does what's right for the people and does what's right for East Tennessee and for Tennessee. And so it's a refreshing voice, Tim Burchett, going up against all of these clowns in the Democratic Party.
There you go. It is funny, too, because the clown show, that's a pretty big tent, because you got all these people that would still vote for a Hank Johnson. People are still voting for the likes of, Rashida Tlaib and some of these other folks, Ilhan Omar, Adam Schiff, lying to the American people over and over and over again about Trump and Russian collusion and the rest of that nuttiness. And that's what they do. So you've got the representatives, and then you have the people that vote them in. Now, you were at the Congressional Baseball game last night, and I from what I understand, Tim Burchett walked. I spoke to Congressman Burchett. He walked. I can't seem to find out from Andy Ogles, who was the other Tennessee representative that played in the game last night. How did he do? How did Andy do?
I was there for about half of the game. Of course, the Congressional Baseball game is a great opportunity to bring Republicans and Democrats together. It is, the stands are full of Hill staffers and people from organizations that you've heard of and left-wing organizations that you haven't. And it's a really great opportunity to raise money for D.C. area charities. I think that is what we shouldn't lose in a discussion like this. But the action on the field, even though Republicans, 31-11, Republicans have won the last 4 games going back to 2021. And but the action on the field that was not perpetrated by the players, by the members of Congress, was quite exciting. There were climate protesters at one point who jumped onto the field, were tackled very quickly, and for most of the game, there were more police officers on the field than there were members of Congress. And this is because the left believes that no place is sacred, that any place is an appropriate place for a protest. There were climate protesters outside of the stadium. Once you made your way in, there were pro-Hamas protesters who were arrested in waves.
Insanity.
As I was making my way to my seat, there were 7 or 8 who were pulled out of the section right before mine. And then, of course, in the second or third inning, there were climate protesters who ran out onto the field and were quickly tackled by police officers. I didn't actually see Andy make it up to bat. I'm not sure that he did. But a couple of times, the last couple of years, they've had some really good players. I know Senator Paul, who was a star on the Republican team for a while, sat out most of last year. I wasn't even sure if he was in the dugout this year. But This is, it's a tremendous opportunity for people to come together, and they split the stadium right in half. So Republicans and conservatives generally sit in right field, and then Democrats and leftists sit obviously in left field and out on that side of the stadium. And then if you just walk through, you see people that, people who work on the Hill, people who work at associations and other organizations. And it's a really great opportunity for people to sort of step away from the Capitol and enjoy a good night of baseball.
Do you think it does bring people together?
I do. There were all kinds of vendors and organizations out front as you walk in. Meta, Facebook, and our friends at Americans for Prosperity had a table there, and many people who are able to showcase their whatever it is they're working on, the policy issues. I'm sitting at my desk right now. I've got a C-SPAN 2024 hat on my desk that I pulled from the game last night, and I think it is a great opportunity for people to socialize. The thing that we've seen, the problem that we see in Congress and that we see a little bit in the State House in Tennessee, is that the relationships that used to exist, the personal relationships between members that allowed them to disagree without being disagreeable, those relationships have diminished over the last decade or so. In an event like this that brings not only the members together, but also the member staff, Chuck Fleischman, his office staff had Fleischman baseball shirts on, and there were dozens and dozens of members of Congress who had either campaign shirts or baseball themed T-shirts, and it was just a really light atmosphere, with the exception of the protest, which I had not seen at a congressional baseball game before. Yeah,
well, I don't think it's going to be the last time you see that. One final thing on the baseball game last night, then we'll move on. BetOnline.ag gave higher odds for a GOP win, and also pegged the Republicans as more likely to bean their opponents with a pitch or throw the first punch in a bench-clearing brawl. So there is that as well. All right, interesting story that I saw this morning, where you've got the Republicans, I should say the Democrats, they're really angry because of something Hillary Clinton did. Apparently, Hillary has thrown her considerable political weight behind a candidate that is not Jamal Bowman. Have you heard about that?
I have heard about it, but not from Republicans. I've heard it from Democrat rank and file. It made Twitter yesterday. She's wading into these races, and a lot of the ongoing left-wing and Democrat consultants and activists on Twitter are really upset that she is deciding to do this once again. She's done this she did it in 2020, and she wades into these elections. But Democrats are even really tired of Hillary Clinton right now, and it was fascinating to see the kinds of insult and side-eye and other kind of commentary from progressive activists on Twitter about her recent endorsement.
Do you think that her endorsement means a lot to the Democrat Party these days, and specifically perhaps in Jamal Bowman's district?
It may mean something for the donor class. Hillary Clinton, when she ran for president, when she ran for U.S. Senate out of New York, she has a large Rolodex of people who wrote checks to her. And an endorsement by someone with that kind of support, that kind of financial support, lends some of that financial support to the person who's received the endorsement. Does it mean a lot for the voters on the ground? Maybe not. Does it look nice in a mailer or in literature? Certainly, and it adds credibility to someone, especially someone who's challenging an incumbent. But for the most part, the average voter doesn't pay attention. What it does do is provide oftentimes a financial boost or access to donor resources that individual would not otherwise have access to.
Donald Trump, we just had Tim Burchett on. You heard that we were talking about this. There's so many things that the former president can talk about with Republicans these days. Of course, we have the 8 that were arrested with ties to ISIS coming across our southern border. They had this CBP-1 app. At least one of them did. And we've got the spending. We've got more money going to Ukraine. Any number of things the former president can speak about with the Republicans, not to mention, of course, Joe Biden's state of mind. What do you think the top 1 or 2 issues that the former president is going to discuss with the Republicans in the House?
He'll be at Capitol Hill Club, I believe, today talking with Republicans. The financial policy, the fiscal policy. The thing that has surprised me the most this week about Donald Trump was his statement about not taxing tips. And I think if you were trying to carve out a space as the party of the working class, and you're looking at states like Nevada or Pennsylvania or Michigan, this announcement earlier this week or late last week, yep, where he would not tax tips is significant. Yep. And conservative activists are seizing on it on social media. They are tipping, and they're tipping well, and they're taking pictures of those tips, and they're posting them on social media and saying Donald Trump won't tax your tips. I think that's a significant.
I love that. I didn't know that was going on social media. So conservatives are doing that, giving big tips and letting people know that will not be taxed under Donald Trump. That is great.
Blake Masters, who's run before in Arizona, gave a $50 tip, I think, on a $75 check. And this is the only way it works. You can't go to O'Charlie's or, whatever restaurant you go to on Sunday after church and tip 14% and then take a photo of it and say Donald Trump won't tax your tips. It has to be a significant amount of money for that waiter or waitress who is on their feet all day dealing with customers of varying degrees of personality style. And I think this is significant. Back when Ron Paul ran in 2008 and 2012, there was he had a palm card that said Ron Paul won't tax your tips. And I remember as a Ron Paul activist in Murfreesboro, using that palm card and tipping to the extent that I could as a college student, to members of the food service industry. And I think that is a significant grassroots boost by conservatives and people who can do just a little more to campaign. Not a lot of people will knock doors. Right. Not a lot of people will make phone calls, but a lot of people go out to restaurants, and a lot of people enjoy their time dining out with friends and family. Yep. And they can make that an enjoyable experience for a waiter or a waitress, and they can make a minor political point in the process.
We ought to do? We ought to come up with like a Republican WTN conservative card, something, and just have it say exactly what you said, Matthew. Donald Trump will not tax your tips, and just have people give them out. I go to Starbucks almost every day. I know, leave me alone. I go to Starbucks almost every day, and I think it'd be great to put one of those cards in the tip jar there at Starbucks, and maybe they will not spit in my coffee.
Well, most of the time, Dan, and having worked in the food service industry when I was in college, most of the time you get one of these gimmicks, and it's what looks like a folded over $100 bill, and 9 times out of 10, it's a religious tract, and somebody who has been on their feet for 8 hours, and they look at the table and they see what looks like a large amount of money. That is a mismanagement of someone's expectations. But absolutely, if someone were to produce, a little card, a business card, or a small palm card, that would have to accompany, I think, a 25 or 30% at least tip, so that it would stand out. And I think that is it's a nice thing to do. But 2, it allows you to make a kind political point to someone who is probably statistically not likely to vote, may not be registered, but if they have this kind of conversation with someone, they could change their minds, and especially out in Nevada. The culinary union and the unions affiliated with the casinos have a lot of power. And if people go out and say, your tip shouldn't be taxed, and you're at the buffet at a casino and you tip your waiter or waitress, that is going to send a strong message. And I think it's a clever and I think heartwarming even political point that you can make for somebody in the food service industry.